There's something strange in my neighborhood, and it's Ghostbusters Frozen Empire. I didn't watch that. I watched the original Ghostbusters. Click that subscribe button because we're going to talk. I want to talk about Ghostbusters. Let's open up this conversation. This is Ghostbusters, a second look. Obviously, I've seen Ghostbusters before, and I actually watched it on Hulu. Does not have audio description. I know how to find audio description for Ghostbusters in not a way in which I can put on video. So I shouldn't have to. But for all fairness, I did watch this on Hulu. I'm posting this, what is this, March 22nd? I watched this on March 21st, so I had the rights to Ghostbusters, I guess, through Hulu. On March 21st was when I watched it, so should have had the rights to accessibility. I feel like that's a pretty easy thing to say, but Hulu doesn't want to run the audio description track that somebody bothered to create many years ago. Technically, this film isn't available anywhere right now with audio description, unless you know where to look, which I'm not going to, I can't ask that question to you. So, I just wanted to talk about Ghostbusters in general, and obviously, like, this film would be unwatchable without audio description because there are ghosts in it, and they're ghosts, by the way, that like do a lot of different things. They're different kinds of ghosts. They're kind of prominent in the film. The film is called Ghostbusters. I am wearing a Ghostbusters shirt for this. I got all decked out. I'm in the nines, dressed to the nines here. For those of you that can't see, who the audience can see, maybe they can see my shirt. I don't know. I never really even know if I'm in frame, to be totally honest. My camera tells me at the beginning, but I don't know. It's just, who knows? Anyway, yeah, this is the classic film. This benefited from people not really knowing and using the PG-13 rating at the beginning. It definitely would be PG-13. I mean, come on now. First of all, it's got a little bit of some scary stuff that you wouldn't necessarily want your kids to see. But also, they do have some sexual references throughout the film that would have pushed this to a PG-13. There's the point where Sigourney Weaver tells Bill Murray that she wants him inside her, and they do call William Atherton's character dickless. So a couple of times, I think this would have crossed over into PG-13 if it had been released just a couple years later. It's directed by Ivan Reitman. Of course, it stars Bill Murray, Harold Ramis, Dan Aykroyd, Ernie Hudson, Annie Potts, Sigourney Weaver, Rick Moranis, and William Atherton. I think I hit the main cast of this film. Anyway, it's a classic. It's like the classic. There's a really great episode, if you watch the TV show, The Movie That Made Us on Netflix, that goes into sort of how they got to even this point with this film, like how they got the film to the screen. And I think that was a really interesting episode. The whole thing about Bill Murray, how he hadn't really confirmed, and he just kind of like, you just kind of hope he shows up, and it's like, is he gonna be here? Oh, look, Bill Murray's here. Yeah, they just kind of like on a wing and a prayer hoped that their familiar connections got him there. But it's a cool concept. It's really well done. I would say, having seen this film a lot, the only thing that when you go back and look at it is you really notice how much the first film leans on Bill Murray, more so than leans on Ghostbusters as a group. Like, I feel like Dan Aykroyd just comes into this film every once in a while. If you get to listen to the audio description, they describe him as portly, which is hilarious. Because I remember I did see this film like visually, and I'm like, I don't know that I would describe him as portly, but I guess he's not. I mean, he's not thin. I don't know. I don't know. know. I don't know how I feel about that, but it got me thinking. I was like, was he portly? Like in comparison to the other Ghostbusters, sure. Um, but yeah, it's sort of an interesting. I guess he sort of is the largest one of the four. So, but yeah, they do lean on Bill Murray quite a bit as in this film. He has a lot of scenes that the others just don't have. Even Ernie Hudson joins the cast later on, and when he joins the cast, he really doesn't do much. They're just kind of here. They're like, we should have a fourth Ghostbuster. Of course, there's this whole thing about that. You know how Eddie Murphy was originally attached to the film and then had to drop out. So they just kind of ended up with Ernie Hudson. I think they made his role smaller and gave most of the jokes to Bill Murray, I guess. Maybe that's how he got his role to be bigger. I don't know. It just feels like they're not even. You know what I'm saying? This is not like the Ninja Turtles where you're like, oh, they all four have relatively the same amount of screen time. No, Bill Murray has considerably more screen time in this film than the other three Ghostbusters do. But they go out into the world and they hunt down ghosts. We have the opening library scene, which is pretty iconic, to all the way down to the great plot of what's happening inside this building, and learning about later on how it's like this superconductor for everything, and the weird sort of connection that Rick Moranis and Sigourney Weaver have of being in the film, and I just love Bill Murray's interactions with Sigourney Weaver. That whole scene is just great when she's levitating above the bed. That's another thing you wouldn't get in the audio description. The fact that she's levitating above the bed if you watch this without audio description, which this is being presented without audio description anywhere. You could buy a digital copy of this anywhere. You could get this on DVD or Blu-ray, and everybody's fully comfortable with presenting one of the most classic films that is just now getting its sequel in theaters without any accessibility. That's why I wanted to talk about this, is because it's literally, it's everywhere. This film is celebrating its 40th anniversary this year. It does not have audio description anywhere right now. It's Ghostbusters, man. Like, what the hell? Like, of course. So, and part of the reason that I'm also reviewing the X-Men films at the same time, which I'm making that one. I can make more of a broader point because there's so many X-Men films, and I own the DVDs to all of them. So the DVDs actually pick up audio description at a certain point, but yeah, so with Ghostbusters, it's not even on the DVD. It's nothing. It's nowhere. They made it at some point because it exists. There's an existing audio description track, but no one wants to use it. There's Amazon is cool with it not having audio description on there out there, and Apple iTunes, Google Play, Hulu doesn't need it. Nobody needs it. Everybody's just like, Ghostbusters. Really? Because it's kind of a big franchise. I mean, there was an animated series, there's toy lines, there's a ride, or / experience, however you want to look at that, of what's happening at Universal. It's pretty damn iconic. I'm wearing a shirt from a franchise that doesn't have audio description because nobody cares enough to put audio description on it. Yeah, the 2016 remake and Ghostbusters Afterlife both have audio description, but not 1 or 2. No. They have existing, somebody did a long time ago, recorded them. So how are you supposed to get Slimer? You know, how are you supposed to get the chaos that wreaks havoc when William Atherton's character insists upon depowering the units? You wouldn't even know necessarily that they were in jail after that. There's no real like book 'em, Dano. There's no real scene. They're just kind of transition to jail. It's just, and then they, I guess you would find out when they then get asked to go to court, but you wouldn't necessarily know that they were in a jail cell with other prisoners. The other prisoners don't talk. They don't contribute to the conversation. So they're just in this jail cell trying to figure out this thing with the ghosts. And there are other people there, but it's just something that you don't pick up on. Just all these little things throughout the film. The dog, the demon dog. I don't know. I'm sure there are real names for these things. I'm a Ghostbusters fan, but I'm not a Ghostbusters like super nerd. So no, I don't remember all of the names, even though I just watched this film. But the dog that chases Rick Moranis around, how would you, like, what kind of description would you get for that? If if you're watching this, how would you be able to follow that sequence? You wouldn't, there's so many things in this movie that I was going through and watching. Not to mention the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man. I mean, if you're sighted at all, he somehow has graced your eyes. I feel that. Unless you lived in a cave, if at any point in your life you were able to see, you probably saw imagery of the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man, because he's oddly iconic, in ways in which I've seen him in things that you don't even know why he's there. You're like, are we referencing Ghostbusters? Yeah. So it's even that sequence would be hard too. The final, basically the final battle scene is not easy to follow without audio description. But the audio description that was recorded for this is really good. It's just that nobody's using it. So it's very frustrating. That's the problem is, I shouldn't have to crowdsource accessibility. You know what I'm saying? Like, that's not, blind people should not feel like that's what we have to do in order to be able to sit through something like this and to be able to understand it. But that's unfortunately the reality we're in, is because companies do not care enough to provide audio description consistently across services. It doesn't transfer. The studio will release a film, but they won't think, you know what, maybe people will want to watch the other films before they come out. For example, I'm sure there's an increased interest in Roadhouse right now, because there's also a Roadhouse movie coming out with Jake Gyllenhaal. So people probably went back and watched the Patrick Stewart. Oh my God. Now I want to see that film with Patrick Stewart. Patrick Swayze. I'm keeping that. I'm not redoing this review. That was the best flub. Patrick Stewart in Roadhouse. Oh my God. Now I've got it in my head. I've got him doing Roadhouse in my head. Anyway. But there's an example of a film that I'm fairly certain nobody was like, I probably want to watch the original. I really went in on Hulu when they released History of the World Part 2, and they were hosting History of the World Part 1, and they couldn't create an audio description track for it. I was like, why do you have a Part 2 but not a Part 1 with audio description? How do you think this franchise is old? Where do you think these fans are coming from? How do you bring new fans in? Like, if you don't make the whole thing accessible, it's basically like saying that you don't care about blind people. And I know that's not the narrative that they want me to say. I know that that's like that's not what we're saying. We don't not. What else does it mean? Like, the only thing that it can mean at that point, because you care enough to remind people, to bring it up, to prioritize History of the World as a search result, you'll move it up and be like, oh, well, we have this. And now that we have Part 2, obviously people want to watch Part 1. So we should move this up as a search result and let people know that we have it. Because you want your average fan to click on it, right? Your average Hulu user. But we're not average, right? We're problematic for you, because we require that extra level of accessibility. We require somebody to actually try, to actually care to provide accessibility for us. And if you don't want to do that, then basically what you're saying is you don't care enough to do that. So here, nobody cares. In Ghost World Frozen Empire, I can go see that in theaters, but I can't sit down and just click on Ghostbusters and watch it at home. There's no existing DVD or Blu-ray of this that has audio description on it. After all this time, this franchise really is completely inaccessible unless I find it. Like, unless I Hufflepuff my way into audio description. Come on now. Like, we got to do better. But yeah, this is life. This is why I'm trying to do this on a YouTube channel, is to talk about the lack of accessibility in cinema and in film, and I think we're getting really sort of complacent with the lack of accessibility, and just being happy that they're creating it for new things and not really thinking about the fact that a lot of art was created back in the day. Be like if the music world was like, oh, we've got Ariana Grande now and Dua Lipa, so we're good with burning all of the sheet music by Mozart and Beethoven. We don't need that. It's like, but stuff came, and there's a progression of music over time, and just like there's a progression of film over time. I mean, they're still making Ghostbusters movies. This isn't even a dead franchise. I'm not even complaining about how there's not like audio description on, I don't know, the bridge on the River Kwai, which I feel like might have audio description because of the Oscars. And TCM, maybe they created one. That was a bad example. I need to pick more obscure, older titles than the bridge on the River Kwai. But anyway, yeah, it's just, yeah, we gotta do something about this. But if you want to watch it and try to sit through it, maybe you've seen it before. That's the thing is, and I do this too. There are films that I've seen 1,000 times, and yeah, technically I can turn them on and listen to it, and it actually jogs images for me. That's why I've been able to get through the X-Men films, because I've seen at least the first three so many times that I'm able to analyze them without it, and talk to you and bring up very specific scenes and why this doesn't work, in case it was somebody who hadn't seen it before. It's been 40 years though. So you're going to have some people who over the course of 40 years did see the original Ghostbusters and now can't see it anymore. Maybe they only saw it once. Maybe they don't really remember it, so they'd like to see it again with audio description. You'll have a couple people who really loved it, and they saw it 20 times. It was their go-to film. And maybe they don't need audio description, so they're not really that worried about it. But then it's also 40 years old. So you have anybody who was born since then. You have people coming up. You have kids that are coming up and they're starting to discover film themselves. And if a franchise like this doesn't have accessibility, why would they go see Ghostbusters Afterlife or Ghostbusters Frozen Empire? What's in it for them? You haven't brought them into the franchise. So bring them in, whether they can see or not. It is actually that simple. You just have to take the time to think to yourself, what are we doing here? When Disney Plus is comfortable launching X-Men 97, but none of the previous X-Men films have audio description, it's like, do you really think that there are people who are just starting into X-Men 97 on Disney Plus? Like, that's their first thing that they're watching that's X-Men related? Because that's the only thing you have on your service that has audio description. The entire X-Men franchise and Deadpool don't have audio description on Disney Plus. So we got to fix this kind of stuff. I'm giving Ghostbusters an A+, because it deserves it, because it's a great film. But if you were to access it right now on Hulu, it would be unwatchable. So That's it. Thanks for watching. Thanks for subscribing. Hopefully you click the subscribe button so I can continue to talk about audio description and we can continue to have difficult conversations about why we need it, why it's important, why we should have it. And that's it. Anyway, I also have a website, MacTheMovieGuy.com. You can follow me on X, Threads, or Instagram, MacTheMovieGuy. You can go to the audio description project, adp.acb.org. It'll let you know what has audio description and where you can watch it. And you can go to thead.org. That's thead.org. It'll let you know who's narrating your favorite films and television series. That's it for me today. I will watch something else and see you guys on the other side.